Thank you, Father Alexander, Father Kelly, Reverend Fathers, any honored guests, and finally, my dear brothers. This is the story of how God's love pierced my heart. But before we get into that, I'm going to start at the very beginning. So, like many of you, growing up, I grew up Catholic. I went to church every single Sunday, and on the way to church, my family would pray rosaries. My family also had other devotions as well, and the faith was definitely something that was part of our household growing up. And my parents did a lot to teach me well. And one of the things that they taught me when I was very young was that a priest, or to be a priest, is a very honorable thing and a very good thing. And they're pretty cool people too. And so for me, growing up, when it came to the idea of potentially being a priest, I always thought it as a possibility. And it was never something that I rejected or put a sour taste in my mouth, but like I said before, it seemed like a possibility. So when the older people in church would come up to me, you guys know the ones, and they would ask the faithful question, Alex, have you ever thought about being a priest? My answer always was, well, if that's what God is calling me to do. But I don't know if that's what he's calling me to do right now. I'm 10 years old. I got some time. Going into middle school, I didn't have a lot of friends growing up, or going into middle school at least. And because of that, I saw community in a lot of wrong places. And I surrounded myself with friends who weren't building me to be the man of God that I was called to be, but instead got me into addiction and sin. And so that created this cognitive dissonance, right? Where I knew that being faithful was right, but I also wanted to have fun and have friends. And spoiler alert, you can have both, come to find out. In my freshman year of high school, I was sent down on a retreat in Indiana, shout out to Jack Rogers. And it was incredible. I was there with 1,000 high school youth, and I didn't know anybody in there. And we would all gather in a gymnasium. It's kind of like a student-built conference, and the bleachers would be pulled out, and the center was filled with chairs, and the far side was a stage, and at the center of the stage was a crucifix. And the pinnacle moment for me when I was there was when this one guy was up on the stage, and he's talking about God's love. And he's just going off. He's just getting excited, and all of a sudden, partway through his talk, he jumps up in the air, and then he lands with this loud boom. And everybody goes silent, all eyes are on him. And he points to the crucifix behind him and he says, right there, that's the greatest example of love. Jesus suffering and dying on the cross, and he died for you. And if it was only you, he would have done it all the same. I don't know how else to explain it other than it was like an arrow just came and shot me in the heart. My heart lit on fire and melted to my stomach. Because I realized that despite my own sinfulness, despite my shortcomings, despite everything that was going on in my life, God pulls back everything, holds me, looks at me, and loves me. And I couldn't look at the cross without looking at my sin being taken over by mercy. And I encountered love. And I don't know how else to explain it, but like when someone loves you, right, so much to suffer, to die for you, there has to be this inward movement to respond to that. How can you not respond to that? I wanted to tell everybody about this person that I just encountered. And so my response was getting involved in my local diocese by helping out with retreats and getting involved in the youth group and starting to surround myself with good community. And while all that is happening, all of a sudden questions start coming up. People start asking, Alex, have you ever thought about being a priest? 5 years later, 6 years later, eventually I started doing a ministry called Net Ministries. And there's so much I can talk about with Net, but we don't have that kind of time. But one of the things that it taught me was about the unconditional love that the Father has for people. And I desired throughout that ministry to love like the Father does, right? To love unconditionally, not because of anything that I could gain in a relationship with somebody else, but because of the pure act of loving. And I wanted to love like that. And through that desire, God placed before me an open door to a vocation of priesthood and to a calling towards seminary. And that's pretty much how I got here. So I guess to sum up everything, I encountered love, I fell in love, and I love because he first loved me. And I don't have to be afraid of where that love will lead me. Praise be Jesus Christ.